Outside of the Texas-Oklahoma game, the biggest game in the SEC, I would say, was LSU versus Ole Miss. This game took place in Death Valley at night. Ole Miss came in, and it didn't disappoint. 29-26, overtime game. Some things to take away from LSU's performance, some things to take away from Ole Miss's performance. What would you say you took away from this game?
Man, OT thriller. Kyron Lacey showing out when he needed to at the end there. I'd say I take out that LSU, all the question marks we had around their defense are maybe starting to go away a little bit. The defense was phenomenal. 6 sacks on the game. They kept them in when Nussmeier wasn't maybe playing that great at the beginning. Yeah. So LSU's defense stepped up, got the ball back after each turnover. And on the other side of the ball, Ole Miss looked great. At times, they had some offensive inefficiencies, the drop early, the missed field goal, turnover on downs, a little bit sloppy there on a penalty side. But the game was still good on both sides. Both teams still brought some heat to the game.
Yeah. It was definitely one of those games where I felt like both teams impressed me. Like I didn't find myself unimpressed by Ole Miss's performance. Obviously very close to winning this game. LSU, like you said, their main gap was what they could do on defense, and it looked impressive. Garrett Nussmeier ended up finishing the game with 335 yards in the air, and so he continues to look pretty impressive. LSU finds themselves in a position where they got a really key ranked win now.
Yeah, it's going to mean something for the playoffs. Like that, I think, is the biggest takeaway. Not performance. It's how does this impact the playoff? Because the SEC has so many teams sitting right up there at the top.
Yep.
And for Ole Miss, when we were prepping this season, we're like, this is the best schedule that Ole Miss could have, the best team Ole Miss could have to get to the playoffs. And now they're still looking at their biggest game. Georgia was the one they were prepping for. And now they're going into that with 2 losses when really they wanted to go in lossless and that be the one if they had to lose.
Right. 2 losses in 3 games at that, right? The Kentucky loss was definitely not the one they wanted. But for Ole Miss, when you look at, do they still control their destiny, or are they on the outside looking in as we continue this season here when it comes to the college football playoff race?
Yeah, 2 losses. I think most teams that get into the playoffs outside of the guaranteed bids, like there's going to be some 2 losses in there. If you beat Georgia, let's say that Georgia beats Texas, they're going to look solid on the AP poll when you play them down the road.
Mm-hmm.
If you beat that Georgia team and you win out, you beat Oklahoma, you beat Arkansas, you beat Florida, you beat a Mississippi State team who doesn't look that bad against how they played against Georgia.
Yep.
I think Ole Miss now all of a sudden you're in a driver's seat, but you're not going into that guaranteed a spot.
Right.
LSU is much more in a driver's seat and controls their destiny.
Yeah, I think if you're Ole Miss, you got to hope that the Big 12 only gets 1 team in. You got to hope that the ACC gets no more than 2 teams in. Maybe Notre Dame finds a way to lose to, they play Florida State or, just someone on their schedule. But I agree with you. I think if it played out where Georgia beat Texas and then they beat Georgia and they ran the table with an Arkansas team that's beat Tennessee, with the Florida team that's looked a little bit more impressive of late, I think they're in between the 9 and 12 spot in the playoffs. Yeah. It's a big if on beating Georgia because it's something that they haven't done in quite some time. But you want to believe it's possible, right? I think this LSU game to me showed that they can kind of compete at that level. This is the LSU team they did beat last year that had Jaden Daniels a quarterback. So it's not that it's not possible. It's just we got to see it.
Yeah, it's a crazy game. Crazy game last year when they played. This one was still crazy, just not as high scoring as that one last year that seemed to have gone on forever.
Yeah.
Ole Miss, they can beat Georgia. I don't think that Georgia's as strong as they have been in the past. LSU, I think, can do anything that they want to do at this point in the year, make the SEC championship. They have no loss in the SEC right now. They will play Alabama next, probably their biggest test next on their schedule. They have Arkansas, they have A&M, Vanderbilt, Florida, Oklahoma, but they have a chance to pick up 2 more ranked wins if they beat Alabama and A&M. I don't want to say win because I don't want it to happen.
When is predicting the future? You don't want it to happen, but
they have a good resume with that.
They got a really good resume with that, like you said, and this Arkansas team could end up being being a 500 team. That's a strong win if they win that game. A&M would be a really strong win if they win that game. I can't imagine the loser of that game drops too far in the rankings. And so LSU is definitively in the driver's seat. Now the question is, are they capable of driving? And I would say yes, right? We went through our power rankings last week, and I had LSU, I think in my top 5 and for the SEC, or maybe top 4, if I'm not mistaken. And if that defense can play the way they played, with the way Nuss is warming up, this is a dangerous team. I don't fully see that much of a difference between them and Alabama, minus honestly, I just don't really see it. To be honest, when it comes to the offenses are similar and the defenses to date have looked similar. So if Bama's defense improves, it might be similar to what we saw from what we saw from LSU against Ole Miss. So
I think LSU's still struggling to run the ball a little bit.
That's a good point.
Nussmeier took some time to get started in this game. Once he did, he's a good quarterback.
Yeah.
The run game, I think, will be their biggest holdback there. And then I can't say in one game that the defense is there. The DB's play is there yet. That play at the beginning of the game that Trey Harris dropped could have been a huge momentum-changing play right off the bat, an 80-yard touchdown or something. So, Ole Miss, I'm questioning if they hit their ceiling under Lane Kiffin. Because this is the best roster he's put together, the best schedule they're going to have. I'm starting to think that maybe they hit their ceiling. I thought they were going to go undefeated. I was like, oh, they could beat.
You did.
This is good.
Yeah.
And now there's 2 losses that I just didn't expect to happen. This one more so than the Kentucky one.
When you say they hit their ceiling, right? And we can kind of end here soon, but why do you say that? Is it the Kentucky game? Is it the LSU offensive performance? Ulis Johnson for their team played pretty, or Ulis Bentley, not Johnson's the president. Ulis Bentley played pretty well in the rushing game. So why do you say they hit their ceiling?
Because right now they have the best roster and the best schedule. They're not able to do it. So what needs to happen? You have a good coaching staff. You have a great coach.
Yeah.
Is he just not they're not going to look better next year? So this was their shot. They're going to have opportunities, but this was kind of their shot, and it's not happening for them. Right. It's not over. You're not done, but it's not looking good. You're not controlling your destiny as much anymore.
Right.
So I'm starting to think that maybe it's tougher for them to have an opportunity to reach this with him at the helm, which is where those rumors are coming in of where he may end up down in Gator country.
Absolutely. And I think he could end up down in Gator country. Look, if you're an Ole Miss fan who listens to this, let us know where you think Lane Kiffin potentially ends up as a part of this. But I can say that I agree a little bit. It is a little bit discouraging to see some of these close losses to Kentucky and to LSU. Maybe people came into the season with expectations that they were going to dominate some of these games. And maybe their ceiling is, playing them close. Could be, I would say there's swing games. They played them close enough where they've had opportunities to win. They just didn't come out on the right side. So maybe that is their ceiling, right? And I guess we'll find out, right? I think the ceiling can be raised if they play up to Georgia. If Georgia continues to play as good as we believe they are, right? So I think that's kind of where when I look at Ole Miss, if they're at their ceiling or not. But overall, both teams have a good chance to make the playoffs. LSU's obviously better. Ole Miss is very fortunate that some of these other conferences are not representing as much when it comes to the rankings as of right now when it comes to the AP.